The next automated command I want to just touch on briefly is Merge to HDR Pro. I'm not going to spend any great amount of time on this because I know here on Kelby Training and also through our DVDs we have some very specific courses. Matt Kloskowski's done a whole class on HDR and all the various options, including how to take the shots and everything else. So I just want to touch on this very briefly. If you haven't seen it before, the concept is, in this case I would put the camera on a tripod for a challenging lighting situation. In fact, let me cancel out of here and show you in bridge the images that I took. So the challenge was it was a very bright day, the sun was right behind the tree, but if I expose for the sun, then I wouldn't get very much happening in the sky. If I expose for the sky, I wouldn't see much detail in the tree, so I did bracketing, taking multiple exposures of the same image. So that's kind of the setup that you need for HDR. And it does work best when you do this in camera as opposed to trying to do it later on, for example, in Camera Raw or Lightroom. So back in Photoshop, again, automate, merge to HDR Pro. I can either use individual files or point to a folder, which is what I'm going to do because I have my images happen to be in a separate folder. I go and find that. There it is right there. I hit open and OK. And you'll notice there was a checkbox at the bottom that said attempt to automatically align the source images. Hopefully that shouldn't take too much effort because it was on a tripod and had bracketing set up. Then it goes through and stacks the images together and will open the Merge to HDR Pro window. Now, as I said, I'm not going to spend any great amount of time in here because I don't do a lot of HDR work myself, and more importantly, we have much more detailed training available. Now you can see at the bottom of this window, there's my exposures. Unfortunately, you cannot see, it's just underneath. There's little check boxes, so if I decide I did not want to use one of these, I could uncheck that from the list, and then it would rebuild this accordingly. One of the new features in CS5, particularly important, let's zoom in a bit here. Go into 100% and look at the top of the tree. I was taking these photos on a somewhat windy day, and the problem that occurred was there's going to be a little bit of movement. Even though my camera wasn't moving, the object itself was. So this is where remove goes. If you look at the very edges of this when it finishes the preview, you'll be able to see. See, there's the difference. There's with ghosting taken off, and you can see a lot more detail here. If I turn that option off again, you'll see it rebuilds, and you will definitely be able to see, I think, the difference. So that's, in many situations, that is the setting you would want to use. Other than that, like I said, I'm not going to go into any detail. You could try using one of the built-in options and then tweaking the results. I don't really like that so much. So needless to say, you can get all kinds of results in here. The key things to remember is this suggests taking the photos a certain way. If you're really interested in HDR, then you shouldn't be watching this class. You should be watching Matt's class on HDR photography. But that's just to give you a quick idea of what the Merge to HDR Pro command looks like when I was happy with the results. Not that I am, but if I was, I would click OK, and then it would actually create the finished file for me, which of course I would still be able to edit further in Photoshop because it's still a Photoshop document at this point.